Another Atchman 3rd edition battle report. Salamanders versus Kingdoms of Men. 2,300 points. The scenario was loot. First of all, I just want to say this is not my Kingdoms of Men army list. Sean Dietrich asked me to do some testing for him with some troops that perhaps I'd never used before. And so he sent me a list. Most of it I liked. He had a captain in there with a diadem, which I'm not sold on. So I took him out and just bolstered my infantry regiments because they really had nothing on them to help them out. And I'm primarily an infantry fighter, so having making those regiments a little stronger to me was a better choice than having a missile captain running around the table. Okay, let's start going over the army list. The first unit we had in the list was a unit of shield wall, and took the measured force on them because it makes them really reliable. They hit on 4s. They won't do anything on a 4. It makes even the big creatures that want to charge them think twice about it because you know they're always going to wound on a 4. I took a pikeman unit with the sanguinary scripture, figuring that I almost always get a wound back every turn if I had it on there. My foot guards had the great swords. Took a blade of slashing, which I always forgot about. And I put Indomitable Will on there because I kind of used them out on a flank. The next couple of things are a polearm regiment, which I just finished painting, and that was nice. And then Sean guilted me into painting some these lancers I've been working on for a few weeks. And so I went ahead and finished them up. They're not totally based, but they look pretty good with the army. So I was wanting to try the Mounted Sergeant Regiment because of the nimble charge and because they are amazingly fast. I mean, they catch you by surprise, you know, with just their extreme charge range. So the next unit in the list were the archer troops, and we've been debating about chaff, and really chaff doesn't really matter what any of it is, but the archer troops are nice because even if you're not using them as chaff, you can sit there and just ping a wound or two off something every turn. And they really did well the entire battle. I mean, they consistently did 1 or 2 wounds. So I really thought maybe that was a good choice in for chaff. The mounted scouts, I took my Empire Outriders and my Pistoliers and smashed them together and made a unit, which I called the Scout Riders because they had black powder weapons. And get some noble shooting in there. And, of course, a Giant to keep my army line stable. A Night Troop, which was just kind of a flanker unit or something to go after something that's already weakened. And lastly, 2 cannons. This is the first time I've used cannons with my Kingdoms of Men list, and I just wanted to give them a try. The characters were the General on the Winged Beast with the Mace of Crushing, which I, as usual, forget, and a Wizard with a Boomstick, which I like a lot. I think it's a good substitute for like a unit of handgunners or something like that, and not very many points, and very flexible. The other wizard is something that Sean and I both take in our list almost every time, which is a wizard with Bane Chant and the Inspiring Talisman. So the new thing Sean wanted me to try was the Assassin, and I have to admit I was pretty impressed with the abilities of the Assassin, and I'll kind of go over it at the end of the battle. And the last thing is also something that's pretty much the standard in our list every time is the Army Standard Bearer with the Loot of Insatiable Darkness. So let's talk about deployment. I don't have a copy of John's list, so I'm going to see what I can do to educate you here. On the very end of his line, which would have been my left side, he had the Clan Lord on a Fire Drake. The next unit he had was a regiment of Tyrants. I thought they were a horde at first. Kind of hard to tell sometimes. Then he had a unit of Monstrous Cavalry, and they are called Rhinosaur Cavalry, and they were there. You can kind of see them next to the building there in the foreground. There may have been another unit of Tyrants in there. I'm pretty sure there was, right on the other side of the Rhinosaur Cavalry. And then the next thing I believe is a Lacheladon. In between all the other stuff, I believe he had a battle captain on a Rhinosaur as well, because I recall being wavered by him a couple of times when I was fighting him with my General on Winged Beast. On the far end are for sure 2 units of salamander primes, a couple of troops of geckos, um, another Lechielodon, and then on the very, very end of his line, he had uh, I guess it's a Geckotage slasher. It shot at me pretty much the entire game, but it's a massive critter, so unfortunately you can't see it because it's on the far end of the table. As far as my deployment, I had my general on the winged beast and the giant. When he dropped those things on the end, I had really no choice but to put something over there to stop him. Seems like every game I want to play that I end up fighting on the end of the table I don't want to fight on. Uh, my best place to fight, of course, in this game was on there, but John did kind of the same thing that Craig does to me sometimes, which is load up both flanks and leave the middle open. So kind of familiar fighting this style, but it's hard to get used to when they put so much stuff out on the flanks. They're such powerful units. Next to the giant was my scouts. Behind the giant and kind of in between were the 2 magic users. And I thought if I could keep him in a holding pattern there, that the magic users could end up pinging enough wounds off of him to cause him some problems. But I was throwing 9 lightning bolts a turn, so that was a pretty good shooting attack. The next thing there were the scout riders. My plan for them was to move them through the woods and move up and start shooting at the rhinosaur cavalry or the tyrants. The next thing I had in front of my pikemen was my little troop of archers and my troop of knights. The very middle, I had put the shield wall horde along with both cannons on either side of it. The battle standard bearer was right in the middle, and I guess one of the true powers of the Kingdoms of Men army is the very inspiring, because that one model could literally inspire. I think there's 6 units or 7 units there that one model could inspire. So a very, very powerful effect. Flanking them were the foot guard. Along to the side of the foot guard were the went ahead and put the polearm regiment, and then my last little archer detachment was over on the end, and it traded shots with the Lechielodon very effectively the entire game. So I was really pleased with it. It might have been a Commodon over there, because I think there was a Commodon and a Lechielodon over on that end. It's just, like I said, I had my video camera running instead of having my regular camera going. And so next game I'll put a camera on both ends of the table, and that way I can get a better view. So I was fortunate to get the first turn, and so I set up a trap with my giant and my general on the winged beast to try to slow down that dragon. Snuck both magic users up there to fling lightning bolts at him. And over in more toward the middle, I went ahead and brought the scout riders up to start engaging with the rhino cavalry guys. Archers moved to the top of the hill, and I think they planked some shots at somebody. The other archer unit was trading shots with one of his monsters, and the great swords just kind of moved up to support everything else. Right in the very middle, my lancers moved up in front of my shield wall, and they're so fast. I mean, if he ignored me for a while, I was just going to run the lancers out there, grab the objective, and take off with it. So I know that sounds like a kind of a weird plan, but they're so quick that, I mean, they could get out there being nimble, and get that and then start backing off very quickly. And I could move the swordsmen up to support them so they could get away with that loot counter. I was pretty happy with this turn. I did chip some wounds off the salamanders in the middle. I chipped a wound or two off of pretty much everything that I shot at. So I was pretty happy with the turn. So on John's first turn, he moved up his tyrants and his dragon guy up into a gap. I don't know if you could see him, but right beside the ruin there's a little figure, and that's my assassin who's just sitting there waiting to jump out on somebody who walks by him, or just to throw daggers at him. Everything else just kind of moves forward up out of charge range of me, and the salamanders move forward trying to get those 2 objectives on the end. And as usual, in every battle I play, the flank that I don't want to fight on is the flank that has all the fighting. I mean, I really wanted to fight over on the right flank with my infantry hordes against his, but John had moved all of his fast stuff, his cavalry, his flyers, his a hero on a mount. They were all right there, and I had to deal with them. And basically, I had almost light units there, except for the unit of pikemen, and so I had no choice but to fight out here on the flank and just do the best I could. So on to the Kingdoms of Men, turn 2. I rather impetuously charged one of his shooting dinosaurs with my troop of knights. I thought maybe I could get them and bust through them, and then I would be beside his salamanders or beside the rest of his line. And unfortunately, I didn't roll high enough to. I think the first roll I did break him, but then the next one I didn't. And so I was stuck there. And they're behind that ruin, so you can't see them. Mostly I just advanced again. As some of his rhino riders and stuff were threatening my scout riders, I just backed them up further out of charge range because there was no reason to lose those guys. I mean, they were, in my opinion, they're my reserve unit anyway. And it's just nice to be able to go up there and take those shots and then retreat on the next turn because of their nimble and their speed. So I had every intention of keeping that unit alive until the end of the game because I want them to shoot at weakened units. I don't want them to necessarily go out there and try to just grind down on a unit with shooting. Again, shooting at magic, kept chipping away wounds on stuff and just trying to weaken things as I went. So John decided not to be checked anymore with his dragon and flew him into the edge of the woods so that he could flame the scout riders on the next turn because they were starting to wear away at some of his units. His tyrants flank charged my scout troop. Not my scout troop, my night troop that had attacked his Lakelodon or whatever that thing was during the turn. And the rest of his army just kind of moved forward, did some shooting. My army just kept, I was just sitting there trying to check all of his moves because he had some powerful units moving up to hit the middle of my line. And it was all I could do, just trying to think about what would be my next move to blunt his attack. All right, this is going to be a decisive turn for the Kingdoms of Men. The general on the winged beast could see the flank of the rhino cavalry. And we put a base in place. He absolutely would fit in there. Now, the model with his big wings could not possibly fit in there. But I guess the advantage of the general on the winged beast and the Kingdoms of Men army is it is on a small base, not like the tyrant bases, everything else. You can see a tyrant base. You see the giant that's walking right behind him there. And you can see how much larger that is than the 50 millimeter. My scout riders could see the flank of the dragon, and I had thrown Banechan on him and charged him in the flank. I think the assassin also charged him at the same time, but they may have charged into the rhino cavalry to get rid of him. So the result of this whole thing was it left the dragon wavered in front of the scout riders. The rhino cavalry were destroyed by the combined flank charges of those two units, the winged lancers and the general on a winged beast. The rest of the table is just kind of a straight up fight. Over on the far flank, one of his gecko units had charged into my polearms, and then my archers had went ahead and was moving around there to protect them. Maybe they hadn't charged yet, maybe they're just going to, but I'd already moved the archers in place to flank charge whatever unit hit my polearms. Shooting was starting to wear away on my foot guard there, and I just kept trying to shuffle him out of line of sight. So there was his shooting was actually doing quite a bit of damage. So in the foreground, you see there's his dragon. He is wavered. He just turned to face the scout riders this turn. My lancers were kind of stuck over there, and I think the reason why they weren't charged was because he charged my general on winged beast with his mounted hero, and I can't really tell because it's behind that building. I apologize. Over in the very middle, the Salamander Prime unit moved forward and grabbed the objective. And now I was in trouble because he had the objective on the very far end, and now he was going to get the one in the middle. So right now, he basically has pretty much all three objectives. And so I'm going to have to figure out how to extricate some objectives or some loot counters from his army. On the far end, you can barely see it, but some of the geckos went ahead and charged the pole arms and bounced off of them. I think they must have lost some attacks from the last edition because I remember them being a lot more effective than they were. But again, his shooting is starting to wear down my units a little bit. I mean, most of them are up to 4 or 5, some of them 6 wounds that he's been shooting at over the course of the game. All right, this is a really important turn. Down here on the foreground, I nimbled the scout riders out of the way to go mess with his tyrants that were, they look like terrain, but they're right there beside that big building on the left-hand side. That also allowed my assassin and my giant to charge into the dragon, and then the pikeman charged into the flank of him. And so I'm guessing he was not long for this world. Over in the middle, my swordsman went ahead and charged the Salamander Primes that are there in the middle, and the foot guard moved up in support. My archers and the halberdiers killed off the unit of geckos in front of them this turn, and of course the combined charge of the pikeman in the flank and the giant in the front and the assassin, that was too much for the dragon, and he went down this turn. My general on the winged beast was wavered from the attack by his mounted hero, and so he was kind of stuck there. You can barely see the wing of him sticking out behind about behind the building. Just wanted to put this picture up there because, like I said, the terrain was blocking most of the camera shots. You can see here those my lancers had moved after killing another unit and moved toward the salamanders. In this picture, the Salamander Primes have charged the shield wall, and I'll show some more pictures in a second, but they did destroy my shield wall unit and then turned to face the lancers. You can see my foot guard fighting one of his Lakelodon or whatever it was. The geckos that were there protecting their flank were wavered by the archers and the cannon. Cannons are surprisingly good at shooting chaff, which is kind of remarkable to me. But with their low morale point and the shattering, the cannon is actually pretty good at chaff removal. All right, this is a less good view of the picture I had before. It just kind of shows you the whole battlefield and what it looked like. The giants coming up to menace the tyrants, I think, or no, he's coming up to menace the mounted hero that's been fighting my general on the winged beast. The pikemen are moving forward deliberately, trying to get into action, but I got them stuck in those woods, and it took forever to get them out of those woods. As you can see, the scout riders are whipping around the flank to do something mean to those tyrants there. All right, this turn the giant had went up to kill his mounted hero that had been wavering my general on the winged beast. The scout riders moved up with their nimbleness and were shooting the tyrants in their rear. The pikemen went ahead and moved out of the woods and moved toward the melee in the middle. I had to get that objective in the middle. I had no choice. Everything else I was trying to move everything I could toward that objective. That unit was actually fairly severely wounded from fighting my foot guard, and I'd been shooting the cannon at them almost the whole game. And so they were up to quite a few wounds, but I went ahead and thought, well, I could bust them with the lancers with a front charge, and that was not to be. I mean, I did a few wounds, but they held up with some I rolled pretty poorly actually, but I mean, Salamander primes are tough. I mean, to me, they're one of the toughest and best infantry units in the whole game. And so they kind of shrugged off my Lancers, and we'll see what happened the next turn. Okay, his Tyrants charged in and attacked my Giant this turn, putting a few wounds on him. Obviously, you could see that my Lancers were destroyed by the Salamander primes. And he was kind of backing up because he had the objective marker, and he's just trying to get out of range. The other Salamander unit is doing, the same thing because they have 2 objectives already. I have 1 objective, and it's under the Giant. And right now, his Tyrants are fighting the Giant. So the game is very much still in doubt. The bottom units in the bottom corner are just my casualties for the game so far. Up in the other end, of course, bitter fighting up there, and the foot guard are closing in, trying to get to the other objective, but they're just too far away in the woods. And there's another unit of geckos, I believe, in the way, so that I would have to get rid of them first to even reach them. So tight game. I mean, like I said, 2 objectives. He's got them. I've got 1. You can just kind of see it poking out there. That's behind the Giant, and have to get the objective there in the middle at some point. All right, in the foreground here with his mounted hero out of my way, stop wavering. The the general and the winged beast moved over to the flank of his Salamanders, both units. In case there was a turn 7. I couldn't do anything in turn 6. My pikemen charged into the Salamander primes. And the thing is they were really wounded. But you got to remember, this is the 3rd unit of mine that's actually charged that unit, not counting all of the shooting that I have done to that unit over the course of the game. So, I mean, I've already lost the swordsman, the shield wall, the Lancers, and now the pikemen are finally going to have to go in to try to kill that 1 unit. The foot guard went ahead and charged the geckos in front of them. They'd been wavered pretty much the entire game. My polearms moved forward to threaten the other objective, but there was no way that they were going to get it. The Giant finished off the Tyrants here behind the building and put them on their way. And the best thing was it secured that objective. Because right now, like I said, the game is still in serious doubt with him having 2 objective counters. So my pikemen went up and did what they do with their 30 attacks, and the battle standard bearer, which you can see behind them, had the loot, and he went ahead and bane chanted them to make sure that this time that they were gone. So on my very last turn, on turn 6, I took the 2nd objective that I needed to win the game. There was still a chance because I was in range of his other horde that he could try to charge out on turn 6 and see if he could take down that pike unit. But it was going to be a hindered charge because of where he was in the woods, and I have ensnare on the pikemen. And so, there's virtually no chance to beat an intact pikeman horde, especially with the general sitting beside him, with his inspiring to go along with that. Not to mention the battle standard bearer with inspiring also as well. And even then, on turn 7, even if he had broke them, they would have been flank charged by the foot guard and the general on the winged beast, and maybe even the Giant. I can't remember where he was at this time. So turn 6, the game was over, and the Kingdoms and Men had eked out a turn 6 victory over the Salamanders. All right, that was an excellent game. Very, very tight. It came down to the last turn. What more could you ask for in a game? A couple of things I want to do before I kind of go over my other final thoughts is to go over the units that Sean had asked me to test out. And I'll just kind of give you a rundown of them. The Mounted Sergeant Regiment did really, really well. Like I said, its speed and nimble really allows them to do some things that help out the Army. They're not knights. You can't just willy-nilly charge forward with them into things and think you're going to break them. but they absolutely can have an effect on the battlefield with their speed. The two bowman troops, I've never used two bowman troops. I normally use melee troops for chaff, and they worked out really well. I mean, it was just, like I said, 1 or 2 wounds on a chaff unit, then hit it with a cannon, and that unit was either wavered or destroyed, or just something you messed with them the whole game. I mean, they're not overpowering in the least, but they're very handy. I mean, like I said, just knocking a wound here or there off. Mounted Scout Regiment. Sean wants to use them with bows, which is cool. I liked the black powder weapons. If you're fighting against any of the armies like Northern Lions or Salamanders, all the daggone armor 5, it's just nice to have the black powder weapons on them. Believe it or not, this was the first game I actually used the general on a winged beast. I know that sounds crazy, being a Kingdoms of Men player, but he worked out really well. I'm very conservative if I have flyers. I'm really only looking for flank charges and stuff like that. I'm not going to risk him on charging in with something else. So he did a great job, and probably would have been a better job if I would have actually remembered the Mace of Crushing on him. That was kind of handy. As ironically as I could say it, I really enjoyed the assassin. I mean, I didn't really point out what he was doing during the battle, but any turn that he wasn't fighting or helping fight, he was throwing daggers and knocking a wound or 2 off of a unit. And all those little tiny little pinpricks, they add up. When you get to turn 5 and 6, and all of a sudden there's a unit sitting there on 8 or 9 wounds, and he comes in there and sticks them again with a couple of more daggers, he could run them off the table. So I was really impressed with the assassin. I mean, I wish he had scouting so he could go forward a little easier. Maybe the wings of Honey Mace, but then he starts to get to that point of expensiveness that I don't like. I like to try to keep everything in the army as cheap as possible. Again, first game I'd ever used cannons. I know that sounds crazy. I was an Empire player back in the day, and the cornerstone of my army were cannons. I mean, I loved cannons. I still love cannons. But in the second edition, they were just useless. I mean, I would always rather have more troops than to have cannons in the other edition. But they were pretty handy. I have to admit, like I said, they were surprisingly good against chaff. Just because, like I said, if you shot the archers out and he did a wound or 2, and then the cannon did a wound or 2, with the shattering on there, it wavered things as opposed to just, letting it off with a few wounds. So I was impressed. I mean, I like the cannons. I'm debating between the cannons and 3 bolt throwers, or maybe 3 ballistas, I should say. And so, I mean, I'll try it out in another game and see which one I like. But I really did enjoy having the cannons in the army. As far as the rest of the army, a shield wall horde with a hammer measured force 185 points. You almost can't go wrong with it. I mean, it's not going to overpower or kill it, just destroy stuff. But it's not going to just roll over and die either. It can do some damage because it's always wounding on 4. So if you're playing against orcs or Northern Lions or somebody like that, you can pretty much count on like 4 to 6 wounds a turn on your opponent. And they might be doing 8 or 9 to you, but that's not your job. As cheap as your unit is, it's just to sit there and hold them out until something comes to the rescue. The spear phalanx horde with the pikes, I just can't go home with. I cannot leave home without the pikes. I think they're just such a solid unit in the army, with the ensnare and everything on them. Throw something on them, throw a bane chant on them, and they can really be a hammer or an anvil, which is the versatility of the pikemen, and that's what I like about them in the army. Really, the same thing goes for foot guard. The foot guard horde, they can sit there and take stuff, especially if you don't give them the great weapons like I did. They could just sit there and take it and take it and take it. And you throw Indomitable Will on there, you're not going to waver them. Even if you do waver them, you always have a way to unwaver them for at least for a turn. With the 2-handed weapons, if you're fighting something that's really tough, and you can throw Bane Chin on them, now you're hitting on 3s with Crushing 2. I don't care what it is; it's going to feel the wrath of those foot guards. I really like the Polearms Block Regiment for a support unit. It's got all of those. It's 12 swings with Crushing 1. Again, you could throw a Bane Chant on them, and all of a sudden you've got 12 swings of Crushing 2, and you just can't ignore them. And they're cheap. I mean, they're just a little over 100 points. So what's not to like about them? The Knights Troop, I think I just kind of blew it this game with them. I mean, I thought that that would have been something I maybe have used something else for with the points, but I mean, I didn't really give them a fair chance either. And so I think that has a lot to do with my thinking on them. Wizard with a Boomstick, what can you say? Rock solid. I mean, that's a great choice. The other wizard, like I said, is my standard SOP wizard, which is it replaces the lightning bolt with the fireball, have Bane Chant, and the inspiring talisman. Like I said, it's in my army list every time. It's almost like the first character choice because it just makes the absolute most sense. Again, great battle. Came down to the very, very end. I'm not sure what to tell Sean on changing his army. I really kind of like the list. I mean, it's not like overpowering or anything, but lots of drops, lots of versatility, which I think is kind of cool. I didn't like the original thing he had in there, which was a captain with the diadem. Taking the points and making the infantry units better was actually a better investment of points than it was having this guy out there that shooting with a diadem. I mean, he's not very expensive, but on the other hand, I think, and originally I bumped the spears up to pikemen, and I was able, on top of that, to give them the sanguinary scripture, and then was able to give Indomitable Will and the Blade of Slashing to the foot guard with those same points. There was something else I was able to, maybe the Mace of Crushing on the General and Winged Beast. That those 70 points that was used on that character really, I think, made taking those, reinvesting them into the army to make the units that were in the list better. I think was a key to how well the army performed. I'm not sure that they would have done as well with without those changes. So those are my final thoughts. Hope you enjoyed the battle report, and tune in next time.